Okay, we are on today's daf Amud Ches on the base, but we're going to start on the bottom of Ches Amud Aleph. We quoted three shitas in how often do you do hazah on the Kohen Gadol when during his prisha, and the Kohen Haser Vesapara during his prisha. The first opinion was Reb Meir, who said you do it every day of the 7 days. Rabbi Yossi says it's only on day 3 and day 7. And then Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohenim said, for the Kohen Haser Vesapara, you do it all 7 days. And for the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, you only do it on day 3 and day 7. Three shitas. Says the Gemara, Kaman Azla Hadatan Rabbanan. We have a brisa. Who does this brisa go like? Here's the brisa. Ein bein kohen haservis apara l'kohen gadol b'yom kippurim. There's no difference between the kohen who was burning the parah aduma and the kohen gadol before Yom Kippur. Ella, here's the difference. Shezeh prishase l'kedusha. The kohen gadol is pirish l'kedusha. Rashi, top Rashi says l'kanes l'machne shchina. He goes into machne shchina. I mean, it sounds like the place where he goes. V'lo yehi libay zach alav, and he shouldn't. V'yehi nivdal mikol kal Yisrael. She's got to be separate from all levity. Serious. Shechol of imam b'havlos ben abrias. He got to have there's a certain level of ima, fear that needs to be upon him. So that's what Zeh Prishas L'Kedusha. The Gemara continues. And Kahanim are allowed to touch him. He's allowed to touch the other Kahanim. They're allowed to touch him. But the Kohen that serves a par, Prishas L'Tahara, his Prisha Rashi says, the point of his Prisha was to make sure he remained Tahar, because they would be Matam him on the day of. And therefore it says his prisha was latahara ve'ein his friends cannot touch him, because the whole point was to be ma'avishim latahara. Now says the Gemara, so who is this? Come on, Erev Meir, Erev Yossi. It's going to be either Erev Meir or Rabbi Yossi. Why? Because if it was Chanina Skana Kohenim, there'd be another difference between the two, and that is that the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur only got Hazah on Shlishi Shvi, as opposed to the Kohen Service of Parah got it for 7 days. So this has got to be either Meir or Rabbi Yossi. It cannot be Chanina Skana Kohenim. Now, we learned on that base another difference. Frektosis. Tamali, Akati, Ikanami, Shazep Persian Lishkas Paredrin, Shazep Persian Lishkas open Abira. They're going to two different places. Shtakakasha. That's what we're going to do the whole basis. V'yesh Leimer. Taisa's answers. The like a chashiv elamilsa de chashivusa. Sheyesh ma'ila bezeh mi bezeh. The fact that your office is looking over this and your office is looking over that, we might think this is chashiv, but that wasn't considered a chashiv. It's where your office was. The Taisus is agreeing. It is a difference, but not a significant difference where your office is. First teretz. Second teretz, the Taisus says, "Inami nearly the parish." Taisus, I'd like to explain like this. When you read the word Shazeh Prishas L'Kedusha v'Achav HaKahanim Noigen Bay, was that 1 point or is that 2 points? Zaktai says maybe that's 2 points. And this that it says Zeh Prishas L'Kedusha, the Zeh Prishas L'Tara is good for the chiluk of which office they went to. Zaktai says Inami nearly l'Parish Shetrei Mili Kachashiv Zeh Prishas L'Kedusha Dahain Lishkas Paredrin. When we say that this prisha was the kedusha, that is referring to that Lishkas Paredrin Shahisa Benuya B'Kodesh. That was built in the Kodesh. Now we had a discussion about this. Where was this office built? Because we had a problem with it being built in the Azara, because then you can't sleep there. You can't sit down. Even if you'll tell me that it was Pesucha L'chal. Now this would be advantageous to us, meaning it didn't open to the Azara, it opened to Harabais. Why does that make a difference? If you're opened only, if the doorway was only to the chayil, then the whole office had a din of chayil. And he says it has to be that way because otherwise you couldn't sit there. So if you're going to be concerned, yeah, but this room is not Kaddish, because it can't be Kaddish, she's got to be able to sleep there. And I can prove to you because the door opened to the outside, which means that this was a choldika room. So he says, even if that's true, it's still okay. Since it was close enough, it was built b'makim kedusha. It was just because it technically was chayil, that wouldn't be an issue. Okay, and that is zeprishas l'kedusha. V'zeh and the kind of sefer zapar is prishas l'tahara l'ishkas b'nei abira ha'medes b'harabais she'ein by kedusha yisur Yerushalayim had no more kedusha than Yerushalayim did. Elatar yoser. It was more. I don't know if that means it had. I'm not sure exactly how to read that. She'ein by kedusha yisur Yerushalayim elatar yoser. She'azav b'balkeri v'chol mishatum yoser megufa ein nechnasim loy. I think that was the same tomb as Yerushalayim. Okay, so that's what he wants to tie in. That is taka the chiluk between Zepri Shas L'Kedusha and Zepri Shas L'Dara is exactly what office they were in.
Meaning what? Harabais Yerushalayim. Harabais is no more kaddish than the rest of Yerushalayim.
Or that in Harabais you can't come in if you have a tomb that's Jason Megufay. Which I think is true. Yerushalayim, you could. So that's how to read it. So this Lishka was, I guess, Kaddish Kaharabais, which just meant that you could, which was basically the same Kedusha as Yerushalayim, except for the fact that Izav, or someone who had a tomb that Jason Megufah couldn't enter. Which is what people who go on to Harabais go to the mikveh first.
But they're not kept out in Yerushalayim.
Correct. No, that is the difference. You're right. You're reading it correctly. The difference between Yerushalayim and Harabais would be whether a tomb that Jason Megufah is allowed to go into.
So in theory, depending on how we understand this, there was a single entrance to this Paredrin.
The Lishkas Paredrin, correct.
Which was either only accessible via the Azara?
No, it was not accessible via the Azara. If it was accessible via the Azara, then it would be Kodesh. It was only accessible via the place that was cool. It was
so we definitely ruled out that it was not accessible, that it wasn't like and it only had one entrance?
Taisa and Rashi both assume that this was not in the Azara because otherwise you would not be allowed to sit there.
Okay.
So that's what Taisa's kasha was. 1 second. How could I tell you that Prishas of the Kedusha means that it was to the Lishkas Paredrin? The Lishkas Paredrin was not Kaddish like the Azara. So his Tarot says, yeah, but it was close enough. As opposed to Lishkas, the Lishkas, what's it called?
Abira?
Yeah, Lishkas Abira, which was not close to the Azara. It wasn't like next to the Azara.
Which we knew right off the bat that it was close.
Right. It was chol and really doesn't, it has as much kedusha as Harabais. Okay. Now, V'yesh Mefarshim says Taisus, the Lishkas Paredrin Haisa Pesucha LeKodesh. The Lishkas Paredrin was open to the Kodesh. V'avagav the Imkein Kodesh Havi Ben Yishenin Ba. So if it's open to Kodesh, that means it is Kodesh. So then how could you sleep there? So it says, Kivan Shebenuya Bechol Upesucha LeKodesh. V'nehi Toicha Kodesh L'inyan Achilas Kache Kachim Kedamash Beizim Akaiman Miyumutu Leishir Ba Velishim Ba L'Kache L'Gamri Kedushas Hazara. So this says there's another way to go here. You could say that really it was built in Chayil, but it was open to the Azara. And it being open to the Azara gave it a din of Kodesh, but not Kodesh like the Azara. Just Kodesh that had a din you could eat Kache, which Kachim? You could eat Kachim in there. You could eat Kachim in there, like the Azara, but it didn't have a din of the Azara.
So then it had two access points, one from the outside and
no, it only had an access point from Kodesh, and therefore it had a din of Kodesh. But we assumed before that if it has a din of Kodesh, then it has the kedusha of the Azara, which you're not even allowed to sit in. Taisus is saying no, since it was built in Chayil and it wasn't built in Kodesh, even though it has dinim of Kodesh, it doesn't have the din of the Azara. Okay. It means there's a distinction between. I don't know. I wish I was a better lamb and had a. I actually heard a shir. I heard a shir from Rabbi Ganek on OU Torah, and he said it over for salvation, like the right words for this, and I forgot them. There's kedushas hamakim and kedushas beis hamikdash or something like that.
Okay.
So kedushas beis hamikdash, I guess, is any shiva bazara, and kedushas makim is that you're allowed to eat kachim, kachim there. Two different kedushas. Okay, let's finish off the thesis. Meal. With the leishavo, the lakachel, the gammon kedushas hazar, the arena, the paragezum mekayman, the ein chayav and alayin kares tamei amanach lesson sham. If someone tamei would enter into this lishka, he wouldn't be chayav kares. So you see that it doesn't have the kedusha of the avzara. V'achinayim with the leishav lishan sham. So there's an in between state. Okay. Now and then Taisus has to finish off his pshat. Then there's another difference. I'm explaining to you. Taisus says my pshat there is that when the Gemara says shazu pshat lusha v'achavachanim noigim by is two distinct points. Therefore Taisus continues. Now there's another difference. Milsa b'achriti. Another point is that achavachanim noigim by v'zeh ein achavachanim noigim by. Okay, that's Taisus's two mahalchim in this kasha that he had. Why don't we mention the difference about which office they went to? First teretz is that it's not significant. The second teretz is that is exactly what the Gemara is saying. And the Gemara is making 2 points, not one. Okay, then there's Esther kasha. Says V'loi nehira. I don't like my pshat. Kedamashmal kamam b'shili perak beis. Gabi zokin yoshev b'ma'arava de'in yeshiva b'lishkas habenuyis b'chol. It seems like Taisa says there's a raya from later on that you're not even allowed to sit in these offices even though they were built in chol if they're open to the kodesh. The Taisa wanted to be machadish, and his teretz was in the Yesh Mefarshim that it could be again. I forgot the Taisa made the two ways to go with the Lishkas Paredrin. Either it was built in kodesh and open to chol, which gives it a din of chol, but just close to Kodesh, or it was built in Chayil and open to Kodesh, and therefore it wouldn't have the Kedusha of the Azara, but you'd be allowed to have Kashim Kalam. And on that Pshat, this is Lei Nehira, because it seems like any Lishka that was built in Chayil and open to Kodesh, there was a halacha that you were not allowed to sit there. So Taisus has the Kasha on his Yesh Mefarshim. Okay. Let's go back to the Gemara. Here we go, 4 lines down. So Rabbi Chanina's got a kasha. Cheshbon kasha. A cheshbon. According to the Rav Meir, that you're doing a hazah every single day. So what's the cheshbon exactly? Why are you doing this every day? So let's figure it out. Bish, Lama, Rishain. I understand the first day the guy showed up. So Shemesh Shlishi. Maybe it's the third day from when he became Tameh. And Sheni on the second day from when he showed up, from when he was parish, Shemesh Shlishi. Maybe it's the third day from when he became Tameh. And Shlishi on the third day, Shemesh Shlishi. Maybe it's the third day from when he became Tameh. Maybe he became Tameh on the day that you took him in. So I got the first 3 days, and then I got the last 3. Chamishi on the 5th day, I maybe Shemer Shvi L'Shishi. Maybe Shvi. Maybe it's the 7th from the first one, and Shishi could be Shema Shvi. It's Shvi. Maybe it's the 7th day from the second Hazah. And Shvi, Shema Shvi. Maybe it's the Shvi of the third Hazah of the from the third day. Okay, so I get that. How you have Shlishi and you do Hazah on Shlishi and Shvi. So I understand that. But Revi, what are you doing Hazah on Revi for? A Revi Lamali Hazah Klal. Loy b'Shlishi Ikolasugei, loy b'Shvi Ikolasugei. There's no subject about the 4th day. It couldn't have been the 3rd day, and it can't be the 7th day. So why would you do a hazah on that day? Kushmak Akash says the Gemara. One second. Is that you're asking Akash? I mean, your assumption to your Akash is that when it says you have to do hazah kol zayin, we actually mean all 7 days. Is that true? Says the Gemara. Hazah kol shvi kol sheva mi'ika. Are we ever going to do hazah all 7 days? The hazah shvus. we've established that hazah, sprinkling of the mechatas, is considered a shvus. Why is it a shvus? Two reasons. Number one, it's near a kimitakin, or that looks like you're fixing a person. And number two, there's a chashasha miyabirenu arba ames b'rishus harabim. So there's a gezerah on moving the mechatas. And we have and it's the two shvus, two reasons. The hazah shvus. The Eina Deiches Shabbos. That's not Deiches Shabbos. You'll ask, what do you mean? Ain't Shabbos b'mikdash? I know that klal. What's the kasha?
How are those reasons for it being a shvus? They sound like more like
Shvus is an issue d'Rabbanan.
Yeah.
So these are two issues d'Rabbanan. One is that it's near a kimitakin. It looks like you're fixing someone, so it's not an issue d'Oraisa. It's not tikkun money. You're not actually you're not fixing a kli, but it looks like you're fixing somebody. So the Chazal guys are on that. Say, like you can't be tevel kalim on Shabbos because it's near a kimitakin. Right? You took kalim that you couldn't use, and now you can use them.
Okay, it's really fine. Got it.
Okay. And the second one is also at some it would be fine, but there's a gezerah shem yavirenu at dalar amis. So shvus is a d'Rabbanan. So it's a d'Rabbanan, and so you're not allowed to do hazah on Shabbos and the Shabbos. Now, you may have come across the rule of ein shvus b'mikdash. In the base of mikdash, there was no issue of there. Like they didn't keep some did there, but there was no shvus b'mikdash. So why can't you do hazah? So the teretz is because this rule of ein shvus b'mikdash only applies in the azara. Outside the azara, it didn't apply, and since this is outside, you see it if you look on the. You have the dishes, and let's read it together. 2, 4, the fourth one. Ein Deiches Shabbos, but after Ein Shvus b'Mikdash, you have an issue of Ein Shvus b'Mikdash. Gemara b'Gemara, Ein Mazon al b'Shabbos, Kibun Shirak b'Tei Chazar Nemrak al Ein Shvus b'Mikdash. That rule is only in the Mikdash itself, only Mechutz Lazar. V'Azah is Mechutz Lazar. Sherei Asur lahachuz Mechadas Lazar. You're actually not allowed to bring the Mechadas into the Azara, given Shem Tamas and the Gebem and Esabem, because whoever's carrying it and whoever does the Azara becomes Tameh. So we don't want you to become Tameh in the Azara. Okay, that's one teretz. The Yesh Sever, second teretz, that Gam Ba'ar Bayis never call it Shus Mikdash. We would apply it on Har Bayis. But Tam Sheloi Ma'azim Ol B'Shabbos is given Shazah B'Shabbos Yesh B'Shnei Shvusim. There are two D'Rabbanans, like we said when we started here. And B'Mikdash are only matter one Shvus. So since there are two Shvusim here, number one, that it's near Kimisak, and number two, that Shem Yaver and Dalam Shvus Rabim. So therefore, you can't, only one Shvus is you can do B'Mikdash, not two. Okay, nice, two teretz. But back to our kasha, back to our teretz. The Gemara said like this. So your kasha was 7. Why are you being mazah on day 4? When he said 7, there's no reason to do it on day 4. So Gemara answers, yeah, but there's the emes is when we say 7, we don't mean 7 either, because you can never do it on Shabbos because it's a shvus. El ma'is l'chol meima shiva l'bami Shabbos. When we said 7, we meant besides for Shabbos. So chanami. So Shiva L'Bami Revi, we said 7, but we meant 7 except for the 4th day. Okay. Amar Rava, Hilkach, therefore. Kain Gal B'Yom Kippurim, the Kain Gal D'Loi B'Di Dantam Milsa, El B'Kvi D'Archatali Milsa. So the Kain Gal, we don't get to decide when to take him into Prisha. We got to do it on Gimel, on Tzayim Gedalia. On the 3rd day of Tishrei, we would bring him in. So then it's possible. The plus of Tishrei Bayla Frusha. He's got to come into Afresh on the day 3. So whenever the Gimel Tishrei is, that's when we mafresh him. So it could end up being that you won't do Hazah on 2 days. You might end up not doing Hazah at all, because if you hold that you only do Hazah to the Kohen Gadol on 3 and 7, if the 3rd day was Shabbos, so you're not going to end up doing Hazah on 7 because there's no 7.
You're still going to do it once.
You're not going to do it. When are you going to do it?
You're not going to do it on the 3rd because it's Shabbos. Why are you not doing it on the 7th?
Because if you don't do the 3rd, you can only do the 7th because if it's 4 days after the 3rd. So, Rashi said that, right? Yeah. Well, and if you're doing Hazah all 7 days, it'll end up it won't do for 2 days. That would be. Okay, but it says the Gemara. That's dependent on us. because we can take them whenever we want. So we would be mafishim on Wednesday. Then we end up only missing Revi, which would be perfect. Lishkas Paredrin. Tanya, we learned in a brayse. Reb Yehuda, Tanya Reb Yehuda. We learned Lishkas Paredrin. Is that what it was called? Lishkas Paredrin? Vale Lishkas Balvutei. Balvutei Haisa. It was a Lishka of the Balvutei. And what are Balvutei? Rashi says they were officers. Sarim, I think, right? Now, the difference between the Paredrin and the Balvutei were officers who had their position. Their position was not flexible. It wasn't elected. It wasn't removable. They had their position for life. Those are the Balvutei, as opposed to the Paredrin, who they changed very often. Every year they were also officers of the king, but they would change yearly.
Right.
So, they had an appointment. Ella. So the Gemara says, "Betchila hayukarnaisa Lishkas Balvutei." They used to call it Lishkas Balvutei. But then, when the Kahuna Gadela got corrupt, and they'd pay off the king to become the Kohen Gadol, and that Kohen Gadol wouldn't last too long, so they would constantly be renovating this office. So the office became it was constantly switching because the Kohen Gadol was constantly switching. So therefore they called it, like they nicknamed it, the Paredrin, because they were similar to the Paredrin who were always switching. Paredrin were officers who were anointed yearly, so that's what they nicknamed it. So that's what they were called, the Lishkas Paredrin, because that's what it was like. Okay, we'll continue with Hashem tomorrow from this spot on the Gemara.